Everything is just a huge mess.
Basically like a yellow slug.
Bites down on this guy's eye. Then she goes off and starts having like tea and cake.
Very thinly veiled Singapore.
Hey guys, welcome back to another reading vlog. This vlog is going to be part of my Reading Around the World challenge, where I'm reading a book from authors of every country. And in today's video, I'm going to be reading authors from Singapore. So if you don't know, I live in Singapore currently. I am originally Canadian, but I've been here for 3 years. The first is the Gatekeeper. I've talked about this a little bit before on my channel. And this follows a young Medusa named Ria. And she basically turns an entire village to stone and has to hide underground because of it. Decades later, Mantikura, the city this is based in, is now a modern urban city-state, and there is a man who is bored with his privileged life. He stumbles upon the entrance of a cave where the main character, Medusa, is living, and that sparks a chain of events which eventually leads to danger. This is the winner of the Epigram 2016 Fiction Prize. Epigram is like a local printing press. So I feel like this one is going to be really exciting. I'm kind of expecting it to be one of my favorites. Another book that I have is The Formidable Miss Cassie. That is by Mihan Bui, and the back says, in 1890 Singapore, the formidable Miss Lida Cassie arrives as a paid companion to Sarah Jane Bendemeer, whose family suffers under the thrall of Southeast Asia's most terrifying hunter, who's like a ghost. But there's more to Miss Cassidy than meets the eye, and she's faced down worse in her life than a Pontiana. So I think this will be quite fun. I think it's supposed to be fairly cozy and fun, not too frightening with the ghost stories. I'm excited to read something that is set in historical Singapore as well. And the final book that I'm going to be reading is Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows. This one I've actually already started to read. The story is about Nikki, who lives in the UK in London, and she's from a pretty traditional Punjabi family, is kind of under pressure to have an amazing job, to get a husband, to live her life in the way that her family approves of. And so she takes up a teaching job at her local temple, and she's planning to teach women how to do creative writing, and she has like all of these great grand ambitions. And then when the women arrive, they're mostly widows who can't even read or speak English particularly well, so it becomes much more of like an introduction to English class. So she begins to slowly teach them how to read and write English, kind of in a funny turn of events. It turns into like a creative writing class that focuses mostly on erotic literature. And so they're trying to kind of keep this a secret from a lot of the community because they're afraid of like how that might look or sound to people, teaching erotic literature writing in a temple in a very conservative area that has a lot of first generation immigrants. Yeah, this has been very funny and very interesting so far. I find it really interesting to read about this young woman who's kind of living pulled in between like a really traditional culture and family expectations, and then her own sort of attachment and influences from people who are her age living in London, the more like liberal and westernized crowd. As I said, I'm like halfway through, and it's really quite a beautiful connection that she's starting to build with a lot of these women. The stories that they're writing, there's like little sections where you can kind of read one of these erotic stories, but they're not much. They're not fully fade to black, but they're not like super graphic either. But the focus really stays on the women and the relationships between them. So yeah, this has really been quite a fun book so far, and I'm really excited to see how things progress, because I feel like at some point someone's got to figure out what's happening and shit's gonna hit the fan. Yeah, I have to go to work, hence the shirt, and I'll check in later with you guys. I'll hopefully get some reading done on the bus. Hey, hello, it is Saturday, and I am about 50 pages the end for Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows, and I am generally really enjoying this book. And I'm gonna close my window, hang on. Okay, hopefully that's like slightly quieter. I don't think it is, but anyway, I'm really enjoying the book so far, but there's a lot more heavy and serious topics than I was really expecting from it. I was expecting it to be like very fun, very light, and like funny, sort of like, and it is, but I think that a lot of the humor was really necessary for the author to be able to talk about some of the themes and the issues that come up in the book and not have it be this like really heavy, depressing read. I could tell almost immediately that there was going to be a little bit of a mystery or more serious kind of undertone to it, but because the woman who hires Nikki to do this job in the temple is being blackmailed, and you find that out like really early on in the first chapter this woman has from her perspective. She's being blackmailed over the phone by somebody about something, and her daughter has gone missing or was disappeared or murdered. You don't really know until you're much later in the book. And then there's also these brothers, I think they're called the Brotherhood, that are hanging around sort of on the temple grounds and in South Hall, the area of London that this is set, that is has a lot of traditional Punjabi community living there, and they are sort of like the morality police, harassing women about how they're dressing, about people's behavior, and like harassing everybody, really. Nikki, the main girl, also has like sort of a romantic entanglement with some guy that she meets as well. So there's a lot that's going on in this book, and considering it's only just over 300 pages, so I'm not really sure how the author is going to completely wrap it all up, because I'm at the point where everything is at its worst, like everybody is at their lowest, everything is just a huge mess, and there's only 50 pages left, so I don't know how she's going to wrap it up. I'm going to read it right now, and I will check in with you guys when I finish. I finished the book. I really liked it. I liked it a lot more than I was actually expecting to. I thought it was going to be a fun read, but I wasn't expecting that there would be the amount of substance to it I think that there ended up being, and I appreciated that, and I think that it was handled really well, and that the author approached a lot of these really difficult and for some people quite painful subjects. I needed to switch angles a little bit because my arm was not going to be able to sustain the MySpace angle that I had. But this book it was really good, and she handled a lot of the really difficult themes really well, I think. The theme of like what it means and what it should look like to be a woman is a really big one in this book, and like how that changes through someone's lifespan, especially when you're coming from a context of a more conservative culture. And I think she just handled that really thoughtfully, and the book really grapples a lot with the contrast between this like ultra modern and also very Western and very contemporary way of living your life, as we see with Nikki, who knows how to use a lot of technology, and she's super liberal and has grown up with sort of English culture being really her first culture. And then she's having this interaction with widows that are from Punjab and don't speak English, don't read English, and are not just from Punjab, but they're also from like very small villages, are a lot older and more traditional. And so there's sort of this contrast between the characters, and I really thought there was a lot of very beautiful exchanges. Both the young and old had something to offer, so I thought that it was just a really beautiful book. And I think my only sort of criticism would be that I would have actually liked it to be just a little bit longer. Like I said, like an hour ago or whenever I was last checked in with you guys, she was dealing with a lot of different topics and themes, and there were a lot of subplots and threads throughout the whole book, and all of them were really engaging. Like I didn't find any of it particularly boring. I actually wanted a little bit more of all of it to make it feel like fully satisfying, and like I got to know all of the characters on the level that I was really wanting to. Certain character stories and subplots the ending that they got could have felt more earned if we had just a little bit more time with them. But I mean, that's kind of a personal preference thing. I still thought it was a really wonderful book, and I would definitely recommend this to anybody. But now I'm going to actually go out and do a little bit of errands. I'll show you the area that I'm going to. It's called Katong Joo Chiat. I need to get some like groceries and get some things done. I might get some food, and yeah, we'll just see. We'll find out. But I'm also going to bring along the formidable Miss Cassie. I think I'm going to read this one next. I'm dying to read The Gatekeeper, but I'm kind of holding off on it because I feel like that one's going to be my favorite, and I'm kind of wanting to save my favorite for last because it's a little bit more speculative. It's a little bit more, I think we're going to leave it for last, and we're going to move on to the formidable Miss Cassie.
raindrops on the red dust. It's never smelled so good. Lay by my side, keep your eyes wide.
Last night, my husband and I went to a little food stand and we got durian because that's in season. And I thought it would be kind of fun to show you guys what that looks like because it's kind of a notorious fruit, but I feel like a lot of people who live outside of Asia haven't heard of it or tried it. So this is what it looks like. It's kind of basically like a yellow slug. And it's really hard to describe the texture because it's really, really creamy. But what durian is quite famous for is it has a really strong smell that some people find really pungent. And I personally don't mind it. I might not call it a really good smell, but I think that it's fine. And I think I've learned to associate it with a really nice, creamy, sweet flavor. Best comparison I can think of is like a really rancid sock that's been like left in the car, like a hockey player's rancid sock that's been left in the car for like weeks. Yeah, I mean it doesn't smell incredible, but I don't mind so much anyway. This one's not quite as soft. Like some of them are super ripe and like super like soft and creamy, but this one is kind of, I mean, it's still pretty creamy, but yeah, this one's not bad. But some are also quite bitter as well. We usually get, I think it's called D28 red prawn, and that's like the sweetest and creamiest type. But yeah, that's durian. I personally really like it. Actually, I personally really love it because there's lots of videos online of tourists like eating something like, "What? This is terrible." And I feel like they're eating like a really bitter, like I don't know if astringent is the right flavor, but like kind of astringent. But yeah, I love durian. Another fruit that I really like is called mangosteen. It's like a little, I don't know what you would call this, like open it by like popping it. I have bad grip strength apparently. And then inside is a little fruit. This one's like very palatable, I think, for most people. It's very juicy and like very nice. Okay, good morning, guys. So I'm getting ready to go to the Botanic Gardens this morning. My husband and I walk there quite often, and I realized that I'm really showing you what it's like in my life as a Singaporean expat more than anything else. So it's very much a picture of Singapore filtered through an expat's gaze. This is not a good time for me to stop talking, like stop doing what I'm doing and talking. But while I do that, I just figured I might try to give you a little bit of an update as well on where I'm at with Miss Cassidy. So I'm about 40 pages in and I'm really enjoying it so far. It's a little bit different from what I was expecting. It's definitely, the language is written in a very historical way. I think each section of the book is going to kind of be like a different ghost and like a short story about Miss Cassidy encountering these ghosts. So the very first one, as I said, pretty early in, she encounters the Pontiana. And the Pontiana is like a ghost that people very much believe in here. And she takes the form of a young woman who hangs out mostly under banana trees, I think, but also in like the boughs and branches of just other trees. And she specifically haunts men and is like sort of a vampiric figure. And so I was reading it in bed with my husband the other night, and I'm finding it quite funny because she starts off the book with Miss Cassidy arriving and kind of hearing about all of these different ghosts and stuff in the like local superstitions. And the owners that she works for are Caucasian, they're British, and they kind of tell her like, oh, don't pay any mind to that, like don't take it seriously. But she is seeing these ghosts, and then the first time the ghost comes to the house, the Pontiana, she sees this like beautiful woman attack, but the way she describes it is like actually quite scary. And like it's, you know, its jaw kind of unhinges and all of its teeth come open and bites down on this guy's eye. Then she goes off and starts having like tea and cakes and like doing lady things, attending parties in Singapore. And yeah, I don't know, I'm enjoying it quite a bit. So 40 pages in, I think that the next section of the book, part 2, deals with a different kind of ghost. And So I'm really bad at multitasking. That looks really, really dark. I don't think I can do this, but anyway. Part 1 is good. We'll see what part 2 is like. And I'll check in with you guys later when I have 2 eyebrows on. So that's how it is. It was a really nice way to pass the time. This book was not how I expected it, and I do think that I mean that in a very positive way. Miss Cassidy is a very no-nonsense kind of character, but at the same time she is always like sort of raising or communing with the spirits of the dead, banishing these like ghosts and doing like generally kind of witchy, creepy stuff. And so this book is kind of a weird blend between being like a book of manners and like a Bronte kind of book, but then the other part of it is like fantasy, kind of like horror. So that's where it's like sort of cozy horror vibes, which is I quite like actually. If you know more books that have like cozy horror, tell me what they are. Share them with me. I might like to read them. But I don't know if the book cover necessarily screams Pontiana. It definitely leans towards like the more charming, cozy side of this. At first, I thought it was kind of a strange decision in some ways to make the main character an Angmo, because Miss Cassidy is Scottish, and I just thought that was a really interesting move, a foreigner experiencing Singapore for the first time. But as I was reading it, I was trying to think like maybe she chose to do that because that way Miss Cassidy was kind of like on the outside and you could explain things to the reader a little bit more, or because there's 3 or 4 kind of main ethnic groups in Singapore. All of these people have very distinct traditions and sort of mythologies or tales around the ghosts. But maybe like another reason that she opted to make Miss Cassidy a white woman is because it allows her to sort of learn and explore a little bit from each, whereas if the main character was a local person, they would be probably only resolving issues and banishing these creatures using the kind of knowledge that they specifically grew up from. I really wasn't sure. And then I got to the end where, I'm not going to spoil it, but there is a very big twist in this book towards the end that has to do with Miss Cassidy herself. And it was very bizarre. It was very unexpected, and did I like it? Yeah, I think I did. I think, you know, it was very bizarre, it was unexpected, but I think that it worked, and I think she pulled it off. Part of what I really enjoyed about this book was the sort of nods to Singapore's history, but also a lot of sort of, I want to say like local lore aside from the ghosts. Because it's all about ghosts, I wanted to go on a ghost tour in Singapore. And I asked my husband, he was like, no way in hell am I doing that. And I asked all of my Singaporean friends, pretty much every single one of them, and they were all like, no way, we are not doing that. That's because like a lot of people still grew up hearing about the Pontiana and some of these really scary ghosts that are really more like creatures. They're not even necessarily the souls of like passed on people, but like vindictive, and they will kill you. A lot of my friends are like, just in case it's real, I'm not coming. So I'm gonna now make a very smooth transition from Pontiana to the Gatekeeper.
Out where the stars forget to shine, cityscapes askew, stuck inside at noon. Out where the stars forget to shine. How far you
I was gonna film a check-in, but I'm gonna go home first. As you can probably tell, this climate is not friendly for my Norwegian blood. I'm hot and sweaty. Go home, eat ice cream.
Stuck inside this cage that can't fit two.
I am about 50% of the way through The Gatekeeper. So it follows the main character, Rhea, and this guy named Edric. I thought that it was going to be a romance, but I really wouldn't describe it that way. I think I would say it's a little bit more of a drama, or I'm wondering if it's going to be a tragedy. But Edric seems like kind of an asshole, and not in like the sexy way, but like a real proper chauvinist. The book is really, really interesting. So it kind of begins with Rhea when she's a child. Rhea is our Medusa character. And so she lives in kind of an environment that's a lot like a kampong, that is like a traditional village, traditional Malay village. And right at the beginning of the book, her and her sister are displaced and they're trying to force them to move into homes or like apartments because the government is sort of making effort towards urbanization. So this is something that actually happened in Singapore's history, and there's a lot of things actually in this book, including conscription, where Mantikura is really overtly Singapore. It's not even thinly veiled, to be honest. It is definitely a political critique of some of the policy choices that were made, especially in Singapore's history, and then the way that that history has also been shaped and told or created now, and then how that impacts some of the people who were affected by some of those policy decisions. Or that's what I'm reading so far. I think this book is also really heavily about racism. Rhea is sort of like a half-human type of creature, but Edric is like one of these people who his mother was sort of like a minor human, where if it comes to an issue of survival, she will like transform into some kind of beast. And he's inherited that, and because of that, his father treats him differently, his social circle treats him differently. It's kind of an interesting approach, this kind of blend of Greek mythology and Singapore's history, and then, you know, some of her own mythology and her own world building. Okay, so I finished The Gatekeeper, and I really enjoyed it. It was explicitly in very thinly veiled Singapore. Mantikura has a lot of similarities to Singapore, whether it's from conscription to similar histories. So there's just a lot of parallels, and I actually found it like quite bold to create such an allegory for societal and political issues in Singapore, to be able to talk about them. And I just really enjoyed how she used Medusa and like this tie-in of Greek mythology to make her points while also telling like a very engaging and very interesting, moving story. So yeah, I really liked this book. It was a very different tone from the other two books that I read. Like, this is much more reflective. I wouldn't call it literary, but it uses more allegory to talk about the issues, whereas like Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows was fairly like on the nose about what it is addressing. There are elements, especially in the very first pages, where they're living in more of like a kampong style of living, and kind of like a Singlish or a broken English. When we get Edric's perspective, he's living in Mantikura as it is in the present, and it's very futuristic and modern. The language reflects that as well. And also, as you're reading, there are like some kind of cool maps in here. So comparing the books, I mean, I can't really compare them that much because they are all so different, completely different in tone. I have my cozy horror here. I think I appreciated different things about each one, but I would say that Miss Cassidy is the character that I might identify with the most. And that's just because she's like this red-haired girl that's moving to Singapore and is complaining about the heat. You know, didn't grow up with the same kind of history of these like really terrifying ghosts, so she's kind of blasé about the whole thing. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. Like, there's a lot of sort of folklore things that I learned about by reading it. like defeating one of the ghosts by stuffing their mouth full of really spicy chili peppers and sewing their lips shut kind of love. I think so. I loved the formidable Miss Cassidy. I loved, as I said, I loved the Gatekeeper. I loved the boldness of it and the way that she used Medusa as a allegory, and the cover art is just my favorite right now. And then Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows was super fun. It was super funny, but I appreciated a lot how this one was actually set in London, and it dealt with a lot of issues that are still, I think, very relevant. I just liked how this book kind of looked at what it means to be a woman through the lifetime. This is just a very fun read. Yeah, I thought they were all really great books. I'm so glad that I read all of them. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Read any of these books, let me know what you thought of them. Thanks so much for watching this video. Until next time, bye.